Good morning. My name is Otto Green-UaBlair. I am the Grand Duke of Misberia, and welcome to the Micronational Cultural Development presentation for the 2026 Digi-Micro Summit. There are various core aspects to a micronational society that need to be identified before one can start building their own micronational society. These include culture. Culture is everything that binds everyone together into a society. Finding common ground or adopting something completely new will help a society grow and develop. Ideology. Everyone will have their own ideas, but finding a middle ground of what topics are approached and which ones need more delicate discussions are vital to ensuring a collective identity. Language. Sharing a common language, whether that be first, second, or even a fifth tongue of an individual, having a common language will ensure a more cohesive society. Language is the core and absolute basic means of communication between humans, and not being able to understand each other will ensure a less cohesive and confusing micronational society. This is often where you will find miscommunications, frustrations, and a general unease amongst each other. Symbols are one of the other aspects of a micronational society. Finding symbols that are similar but not identical to existing national symbols is key to beginning to establish your own micronational society. You would not adopt the American coat of arms as your own micronational symbol, but if you're an American-based micronation, you may find that adopting lesser known symbols such as the turkey or finding something completely unique, such as a dove or a goose, may be more helpful to ensure a national symbol is created. Barriers to micronational culture development. Capacity for culture. Even within small communities such as friend groups, there exist various backgrounds, traditions, and values. This is often where you have competing traditions and values that help others identify who they are, and needing to understand each individual person comes with understanding the capacity for the universals. The universals make each individual person unique. Our faith, identity, age, socialness, behaviors, and economic standings are often very basic understandings of how a person is and where they are going. Capacity for language, as stated before, is vital to ensuring a micronational culture develops. If you can't understand who you're speaking with, then you are not able to properly and efficiently establish standards and traditions. The Misperian approach. What is a Misperia? Misperia is a portmanteau of mistake and timber. The name finds its roots in a relatability of the basic aspects of culture, specifically in culture, language, and symbols. A name which is almost familiar, but is not based on a single language or people group. Misperia is commonly found to identify itself more with a general understanding of we're all human. We understand that everyone is unique and that whether we like it or not, mistakes are going to be made. And timber is often identified with us being a more rural or outdoorsy group of people, whether that be going for hikes or just enjoying the company of our friends and family. The Misperian timeline. This timeline will be used to help showcase how the Misperian culture and society has developed over the last 10 years, and it is hoped that this timeline will help you identify your own timeline that you can use to properly and more efficiently identify your own micronational society and culture. So in 2015, Mistak, the predecessor to Misberia, was founded amongst the siblings of the Green family. This is where we had only 4 citizens, where we started just basing everything on family traditions and values. In 2017, citizens from outside the family begin to join. This is where you start seeing some competing values and traditions. This is where you saw the first Prime Minister, Jane Hathaway, begin to develop a national policy of isolationism and eventually changing our society from a monarchist to a technocratic to a communist, and then later back to a royal society. This is where you saw various changes that occurred in the very beginnings of Misberia. Contact with the Timberians at Camp Roosevelt begins. This is where our rural identification begins to come into play. This is where we met fellow micronationalists at a camp in the middle of rural Maine and began to discuss micronationalism as a whole and begin to trade different ideas. Later in 2018, in November, the unification of Mistake and Timberia finalizes. The name Misberia is adopted. This is where a common national symbol, the name, is first identified and begins to be used. Later on in November 2018, we joined the online community, specifically MicroWiki and Twitter. This is where we start to see a general interest in Misberia growing from just the rural small communities of the Timberians in New Hampshire and Connecticut and the Misberians in Maine and Nova Scotia. This is where we start to see more citizens joining, where we get to start seeing different languages being identified, such as Norwegian and French and Spanish. Later on, in 2019, Misberia unifies with the Aspen-Misberian Empire. This is formed following the unification with Aspa, a micronation that Misberia has close ties with and has had close ties with since 2018. This is where you start to see a general distaste for a larger society and a more unique and unified society of Misberia. And less than a month later, in March, Misberia declares independence following a more renewed interest in Misberian society and culture. This is where you see the first elections begin. This is where you see the very first cactuses being used as our national heads of state. It's unique and begins to identify with a more general understanding that Misberian society is something that is slowly building. In July of 2019, the Confederation of Caledonium joins Misberia. At first, you have the Caledonians who are established themselves in Essex, United Kingdom. A more British, a more urban society begins to join Misberia. This is where we have various conflicts, such as a general distaste for a larger community again, like with the Aspen-Misberian Empire. Misberian Caledonium sees a general decline in its activity. During this period of inactivity, the Misberian government is working hard to develop itself more and to be more enticing. However, this only works to grow in larger societies. We start to see more societies such as communities in Washington State, Scotland, and all over the United States. We see more communities joining Misberia. Many of these communities are quiet, are rural, are very small scoped, such as Mistake and Timberia was in their very first days. And then in January 2020, Misberia hits a population peak of 126. This comes following various in-person activities such as block parties, hiking trips, and online community activities such as Misberian Awards Night, as well as various different crises that begin to bubble up. You start to see conflict with the Bainbridge family. The Bainbridge family is from the southern United States and from the United Kingdom, and you start to see this kind of beginning to bubble. And then in March of 2020, you see it starting to come up to fruition. The Bainbridge family is beginning to take a further interest in Misberia. However, the royal family of Green begins to take a step back and eventually goes on hiatus for a week. Later on, Misberia returns, it continues on, and begins to develop. During that hiatus, we have various different we have various different crises. You have the Sagam crisis, which causes many people to become drawn away from Misberia. We have people who are trying to embezzle money and eventually trying to dissuade people from joining Misberia as a whole. Later on, prominent Misberian Mariah Birch takes her own life. While young, she was a very core aspect of getting Misberia back together following the Saigon crisis. Her death ends up becoming a huge cultural symbol. Her ideas, her values, her traditions begin to be embraced more. The imperialism that she wanted to see out of Misberia is adopted. And following a month-long hiatus and the second Bainbridge scandal, Misberia returns. This is in March of 2021. And in January of 2022, Green retires. This is following a decline of Misberian culture and society following the hiatus in the second Bainbridge scandal. However, in February of 2025, Misberia returns. Green returns. This is where you start to see a renewed interest in the development and Misberian society. Again, we see other communities joining. We see the Agaric Republic join Misberia. This is a very theocratic and rural-based society. This society is very similar to Misberia's in the rural aspects and often and widely has been seen as a very simple and smooth transitional period between Misberia and the Agaric Republic joining together. In October, the Batula Spring occurs. This is a time of transitions between the Antonians and Misperians, where you see various changes and cause and effects of different outside factors. You have the United States state of emergency slash government shutdown, which Misberia declares its own state of emergency regarding the government shutdown. You also had the defenestration of the Chouse. This is where we had various people accusing Misperian officials of trying to take over a community. And again, this is another point where the Bainbridge scandal comes up, where there's more contention between traditional values held by Misperians and the more traditional values held by the Bainbridge family, where you see more development, where you see more contention between the two families. However, in December of 2025, Hesperia's population grows by 8. These people are traditionally non-historical Hesperians. These are people from the United Kingdom, people from Italy, and people from all over the United States and Asia. This is where you start to see a renewed interest in Hesperia yet again, where the language is commonly found to be English. However, the meme culture begins to develop on its own. We start having new memes, we start having new cultural symbols being formed. So, application elsewhere. Next, we're going to be going over how you too can apply this micronational approach to your own culture building to develop a cohesive society. Reflecting on your own micronational timeline, identifying what makes your nation unique. Defining your culture should always begin with creating your own micronational timeline. This allows you to not only identify major events, but also ones which a unifying event can be focused on and foster a sense of community and common culture. Deciding what goes into a micronational timeline is up to you. However, simplifying it after writing it all out is key to ensuring a more cohesive and cultural definition. So, from Hesperia's example, we go back to the death of Mariah Burt. Her death was a huge cultural reawakening. It brought everyone together. It made everyone want to work together. That was a common sense of community and culture. Compare yours to other nations. Could be either micronational or the nation you're currently living in. See what they have identified as defining moments. Think on your own life. Compare these events to your micronations. What what there was impactful to you? For me personally, I go back to the wedding of my wife. She is a very core aspect of my personal identity at this point. And even within my own relationship, our society has formed into its own culture. Our own traditions are being formed. And you can take that and identifying with your own relationships, whether that be with friends, family, or just general people you meet in public. core aspects of micronational society applied. As a reminder, there are aspects of a micronational society. These include your culture, your ideology, language, and your symbols. Breaking down each of the four can help you identify your culture. For example, what general community events occur? What kind of topics are often discussed? What languages or communications are used? When identifying jokes, animals, or designs are appearing often in your communications within your nation. Basic questions like these can better help you better understand your own micronational society and help you begin to define your own micronational culture. In Misperia's case, if we go through with topics, we often talk about the general state of the world, things that we find frustrating or confusing with national policies elsewhere, such as in the United States or Canada. For jokes, we often have a common ground of making fun of full heartedly our own mistakes and activities we do. Oftentimes, that can be food related, or that can just be something we did that's silly. How to overcome barriers to micronational culture. As a reminder, being able to overcome barriers to micronational culture include the capacity for culture, language, and the universals. It is not easy and cannot be done within a day or week or even a month. These things take time. Finding what works and what does not takes trial and error. Finding what certain topics may be upsetting to others or being able to openly share how someone is doing is vital to beginning to overcome these barriers. In Misberia, we saw various periods of growth and decline. You're going to have a huge period of time where you're going to feel like you're on top of the world. But then at other times, you're going to have a long period of time where you feel like nothing is working. However, that is vital to understanding your own culture and beginning to identify and break through these in the moment barriers. Simple questions you can ask yourself to see how your own community is doing include: what kind of topics come up? How is the individual person feeling in the community? Are they returning often or rarely? How open are you and others willing to share and discuss topics, including faith, personal backgrounds, and life experiences? This can be as simple as going, "Hey, I'm a Catholic," or "Hey, I don't believe in a God." These type of questions and these type of topics can help you really root down the relatability of your own society and yourself in your community. Conclusion. A recap. The journey to developing your own micronational culture has to begin at the personal level and looking broadly. How is your community able to communicate and on what topics? Other things to remember is that your culture is always changing, always evolving. Even if you add new people, gain no one new in a while, or lose people like yourself, your micronational culture is always developing and maturing. Thank you for attending the Micronational Cultural Development presentation. I will now take any questions in the comments below.